So here we go with the paper piecing. The first thing we need is the paper piecing template. And there we go. This is the one for Topaz. You print this out at 100%. Do not scale to fit or it will not be the right dimension. Must print 100%. So let's take a quick look at the template before we move on. There's letters on this template and there's also numbers. The numbers refer to the steps where the pieces go down and which order. So the first piece goes to the second piece, then you put the third piece in, 4, 5, and 6. That is the order that you sew it together. There's actually sew lines on here to show you the sequence of the sew lines too. Now the letters refer to what the fabric is, which piece of fabric is going to be in which position. Fabric A is always in position 3, fabric B is always in position 2, 5 and 6 is always going to be fabric C. 1 and 4, that's where the fabric changes depending on the colorway. So depending on what the colorway says in the pattern, fabric 1 will either be H, L, P, or T, and it'll correspond with number 4, which is matching color, either G, K, O, and S. And this will tell you in the pattern which colorway goes where in which sequence. Anyway, so before we begin, as you see, this is a big piece of paper. I don't need all this piece of paper, so I'm actually going to trim a 1/4 inch beyond this solid line that's printed out just to get rid of the excess paper. So let's go ahead and do that. Just get my ruler. Just going to put my 1/4 inch marker on that. It doesn't have to be dead accurate. Just trim that line away. So now I have my paper template to start paper piecing. And as you can see, this has got all the instructions on this side. That is not the side we place the fabric. This is the only side. We flip it over to this side when we want to sew on these lines. Where we're actually going to place the fabric is on the back side. And as you can notice, there's no instructions. So what do? The first thing we're going to do is go back to the front side. I'm going to get a piece of tracing paper. And in this case, it's parchment paper because I couldn't find the tracing paper. And I'm actually going to trace this shape, these sew lines only, not the dotted lines. So I'm going to do the sew lines. I'm going to do the thick line right there, which is the outside of the block itself, and the size of the paper that's already there is my traced out template and cut out. So it's exactly the same as the paper piece template. Now then, you'll notice I've got numbers on here. This is number 1, this is number 4. However, I need to reverse fabrics 3 and 2 because this is going to be on the other side of the template. So 3, which was here, is now going to be marked here on the freezer paper. Number 2 is marked there. The same with 5 and 6. Reverse those numbers. 1 and 4 stays the same. The other ones reverse because what's going to happen is we're going to work from this side of the template. And I'd like to see where everything lines up. So that's what I do when I'm paper piecing. I make myself a copy of a template that goes on the side that never has any instructions, just so I can get some instructions. How do we do this? Well, the first thing we're going to do now is I need piece number 1. So piece number 1 is a blue square according to the pattern. So I'm going to fold this in half. It's a 5 by 5 square or thereabouts. I'm going to fold that in half. I'm going to place that crease directly at the point of the template because I know that's the first place, and along one of these lines on my cutting board, which means this is probably going to be parallel down here. That's a good start. Now then, as you can see, my next piece I need is number 2. But if you also notice, this fabric is the right side up, meaning you will see the right side of the fabric, not the wrong side. With batiks, it really doesn't matter, but when you do a printed fabric, this will be the right side. However, piece number 2, which comes in, which goes on top, like that, and will match. It's going to get sewn across this line. I want to make sure that this edge of the fabric here is at least a 1/4 inch beyond this edge. You don't want to go too wild. You don't want to go like 1 inch or 3/4, not even a 1/2 inch, just between a 1/4 inch and a 1/2 inch. Line that fabric up there so when you go to the sewing machine, you can confidently sew on that line. When it flips over, you've got enough fabric to cover the edge of the template. Again, now this fabric I've just put down is fabric number 2. However, this is the wrong side up. So this will be the right side. This is the wrong side. And that's how we start paper piecing. That's where people go wrong. They can never remember what side is up. Once we've reversed the paper right here to the back side, the only piece of fabric that's the right side up will be the first one. The rest of them, this will be the back side of the fabric. Whether it's a batik, doesn't really matter, or a solid, but a printed fabric, it will matter. So there we go. That's the back side. First thing we're going to do now is I'm just going to pin right here to secure these two fabrics through the paper like that. So I've kept my line where I'm going to sew. As you can see, it's through the paper right there. Fabric 1, fabric 2, which is B fabric, fabric 1, the blue, fabric 2, which is the gray fabric, as per instructions. Now we're going to take this over to the sewing machine and sew it. And what we're actually going to do when we get to the sewing machine, I'm just going to do what I did. We're going to flip it over. So remember, back side. Now we're going to go to the front side, flip it over. Now I'm going to sew across this line here, the solid line. It says sew line 1. That's where I'm going to sew. I'm going to start off the paper, come down and stop a few stitches below. That will be my first seam. So off to the machine we go. So we're ready to start sewing the first two pieces here together. I've already got my leader in there so I don't get no bird's nest going on with that bobbin thread. So here's my first two pieces. I'm going to sew on sew line number 1 right there on the solid line. So I've got my pieces in. I'm just going to give a quick check to make sure everything's laying flat so it doesn't turn up on itself. Let's lift the presser foot here. And I'm just going to start right on that solid line right there. Speed is up to you, but I wouldn't go speedy demon because it'll get a bit wobbly. So here we go. There you go. And as you've noticed, I've gone a couple of stitches beyond sew line number 3. So when I put this piece in number 4, and it's all captured. So what we're going to do now, I don't have a fancy cutter on this machine, so I have to lift my presser foot, pull the thread out, and before I finish, I'm going to pop a leader back in there. So I'm ready for the next piece. All I'm going to do now, I'm going to take this over to the cutting board and trim it up. So here we are back from the sewing machine. That's the first two pieces sewn. There's them stitched together. That's the sew line I was on. I sewed that piece 1 to 2. Now I can take the pin out. Take that out. Next I'm going to flip it back to the front, and this is most important. Just flip back the paper only, where it's been stitched. You can crease it. That'll be easy because of the sewing and the thread in there. That'll make it easy. And then just continue with your finger down there to get a nice straight line. What we're now going to do is trim away this extra fabric that we don't need. So I'm just going to, this is an 1/4 ruler. You don't need an 1/4 ruler. You can do it with your regular ruler. I just happen to have one around here. So I'm going to do that. I'm now going to give myself a 1/4 inch seam right there. Take that away. We'll fold that. That gets folded back out now. That paper does not get cut. It stays with the template all the way through. Do not cut your paper. The next thing I'm going to do is going to flip this over now. And what I'm going to do is flip that back. That is my first two pieces sewn together. This is the right side. This is now the right side because remember, we sewed with the back side up. So the two right sides. I'm now going to take this over to the iron and press that out. So here we are over at the ironing board now. We've got the seam up. I'm just going to take the fabric, push it to the outside, roll it up there. I'm not trying to stretch it. I'm just giving it a little tuck there, and then I'm going to just nicely press that out. No steam, just a dry iron, because I don't want to get the template wet. If I do that, it's going to wrinkle and misshapen, so just a dry iron. And from there, we'll take that back over. Let's go to the stash. Get my fabric 3, which is this gray fabric. This is going to go right here, somewhere in this orientation right here. That's why I've got the template right here. Because if I lay this on there, my sew line is this line right here. So I can match this fabric to be beyond the sew line. And just take your time. There's no rush. Just do that. Take it in there. Sometimes what I'll do is I'll do that. If if I need a bit more control over it and I want to be a bit more finicky, I'll just take some tweezers, just regular tweezers. As you can see, there's the sew line, and this is the edge of my fabric here, so I've got plenty of seam there. Plus I've left enough fabric when it flips over, it covers the edge of the template. So again, remove that, grab a pin, pin it to the fabric, to the template, just like that, all the way through. Smooth it out, make sure there's no wrinkles, and make sure that if you put your pin in like this, that the head is clear of a 1/4 inch down here from when you're sewing. And with that, we'll take that to the sewing machine and sew line 2. There we go, back from the machine. We've just stitched line 2 right there. Now I'm going to flip this over, remove that pin, we don't need it. Then we're going to go back to the front side, right there. And as you see, we need to crease along line 2 right there, because I need to fold this back. We've also got a cross line of number 1 there. Well, tear that away. Don't tear the stitches, just the paper, so it's easy to flip. Crease it down, nice and good. Keep that as straight as you can, that line down there. And if need to, I don't have nails anymore because I got them clipped, so I'm just going to use some tweezers to clip that one back out of the way. Doesn't matter if you cut that off, it's not necessary to keep there. I just like the template intact most of the way through. Trim that off. Now I'm going to take it over to the machine and do sew line number 3. Again, back from machine, just sew line 3 over there. So when we flip it over, it looks like that. Again, this will be the back side of the fabrics, all these. Let's take the pin out. Now what I'm going to do, I need to flip it back the other way, because now we're going to bend this piece of the template out of the way so we can trim it to 1/4 inch. Now with this one, because you've got crossing lines again, you are going to have to break the paper, not the threads, just the paper, just like that. Just give it a little tug. That's okay if the paper rips like that. You don't need the paper at this point. You can just do that, and if you want to be a bit fussy, just like me sometimes, I'll just want to get that paper out of the way. Again, I'm not ripping the stitches, just the paper. Now this time, because my 1/4 ruler isn't long enough, I'm going to use my regular ruler to trim this down. And you can use this ruler all the way through the process. You do not need the 1/4 inch ruler. You just use your regular ruler, just like that. Again, I'm lined up on the edge of the paper that's folded. This is going to leave me a 1/4 inch seam allowance right there. Sew line number 4. Back from the ironing board, just ready to put in the last piece now, which is number 6. Take it over the sewing machine and sew the final seam for this piece of the template, which is sew line number 5. And there, right there, is a paper pieced quadrant. 4 of these I'll make the block in the Topaz quilt, but they're all done exactly the same. The only things that change are going to be these colors here. So the next thing to do is flip this over. And what we want to see is the line we're going to cut this out on is going to be the solid line here, not the dotted line. That's when they get sewn together. So the next thing is to trim all the way down this solid line. And what you want to do before you trim is just to make sure that you've got fabric beyond that line all the way around, which we do. At that point, you're safe. You've got enough fabric. You can just go ahead and trim that up and you'll be set to go. I'm going to show you one that I trimmed earlier, a different colorway, because I don't like to trim mine down until they're all done, all sewn, and then I'll trim them down all together, so I'm trimming down the exact same thing all the time. But if you can imagine, this is just a different colorway, but it's the same piece, just like that. So if I was to trim that down, that's what I just did. Cut the sides away. Voila. One paper pieced block.